Hello Triai. I'm doing this video for those who have missed out my Zoom yesterday. So if you've watched this before on Zoom, okay, feel free to skip on to the next part of this SOS. But for if you've missed it, okay, let's look at living things, okay. And if you remember, what are four groups of living things? Okay, so you have plants, animals, fungi, and bacteria. So we had four groups of living things that we looked at. Okay, I will just do a quick recap of all four groups since now we have already learned all four groups of living things. But before we look at the four groups of living things, I want to talk about an example of a non-living thing. Okay, so here I have a pen. Okay, this pen is a non-living thing. What this means is if I water my pen every day, I give it food, I give it air, I give it water, will the pen grow bigger and bigger? No, this pen will remain exactly the same size. And it will not grow bigger, it will not reproduce, and it will not respond to changes. So if I hit my pen, it won't fight back against me. Okay, so a pen is an example of a non-living thing, but we have looked at examples of living things. The four groups we learned: plants, animals, fungi, and bacteria. Okay, so let's first zoom into plants. Okay, let's look at plants. The first thing we learned about for plants was flowering plants. Okay, so if you remember, we walked around the garden in Tazong and we looked at the different types of flowering plants like starfruit here. And you notice that all flowering plants will have flowers will become fruits, and in the fruits there's seeds. Okay, so seeds help the plants reproduce. Okay, so all flowering plants have flowers which become fruits, and the fruits have seeds which help the plant reproduce. Okay, we also looked at non-flowering plants. So the two types of non-flowering plants we learned were ferns, okay, and mosses. Okay, ferns and mosses. Okay, um, ferns and mosses have no flowers, no fruits, and no seeds. So how do they reproduce? They reproduce by spores. Okay, non-flowering plants reproduce by spores. But importantly, we learned that all plants have a special power. What is their special power? All plants can make their own food. Okay, so whether it's flowering plants or non-flowering plants, all plants can make their own food, and they are the only living things that can make their own food. Okay, that's why they need sunlight, because they use sunlight and water and air and combine it to form their own food. Only plants can do that. Okay, next we looked at animals, and we saw that animals can be grouped into 6 groups. So we have amphibians, birds, fish, insects, mammals, and reptiles. Okay, the 6 groups of animals. Okay, and we learned that we can classify them, the 6 groups of animals, with some characteristics. Okay, so characteristics are how we describe things. Okay, so for example, outer covering. Okay, do you remember what is the outer covering of these 6 groups of animals? Let's try. Okay, very quickly. Amphibians are covered in moist skin. Birds are covered in feathers. Fish are covered in scales. Insects have a hard outer covering. Mammals are covered in hair, and reptiles are covered in scales. Okay, so that's an example of how we classify animals, outer covering, how they breathe. For example, fish have gills. Body parts. Let's take a look at the body parts of insects. Do you remember the body parts of insects? How many body parts do insects have? They have 3 body parts. Okay, insects have 3 body parts. And how many legs do insects have? All insects have 6 legs. Okay, that means spiders are not insects because spiders have 8 legs. Insects only have 6 legs. Okay, so this is the animal groups, 6 animal groups. Next, we looked at fungi. Okay, so for fungi are not plants. Let me repeat that again. Very, very important. Say that out loud with by yourself. Okay, say that out loud. Fungi are not plants. Fungi are not plants. So fungi cannot make their own food. Okay, fungi cannot make their own food. Only plants can make their own food. Okay, so we have three main types of fungi that we learn: toadstools, which are a poisonous type of mushroom; mold; and yeast. Okay, so if fungi can't make their own food, where do they get their food from? Okay, let's take a look at the mold here, the mold growing on my bread. Okay, the bread mold. Okay, the mold is actually eating my bread. Okay, the mold is eating my bread, so it gets its food from the bread. Okay, so fungi normally get their food from what they grow on. So if there's mold growing on bread, it eats the bread. Okay, and some examples of things which are not fungi. Okay, so these two things here are not fungi. Ferns are not fungi. Mosses are not fungi. They are non-flowering plants. Okay. Next, let's move on to bacteria. Okay. So bacteria, okay, are very, very tiny, and you can only see them under a microscope. So they're called microorganisms. Okay. And they can be found everywhere. So in our bodies, in the food that we eat, even the water that we drink. Okay. So bacteria can be found anywhere, and they can be useful or harmful. Okay, I think you're quite familiar with bacteria that's harmful. So for example, if we fall sick, many times it's because of bacteria. Okay, so bacteria can make us fall sick. Okay, useful bacteria. Let's take a look at yogurt or Yakult and Vitagen. Okay, so how many of you have drunk or drink Yakult and Vitagen? Okay, I drink Vitagen. Okay, do you know that in Vitagen and Yakult there's millions and millions of bacteria, millions of bacteria in every drink of Yakult and Vitagen. But you can't see it because bacteria are very, very tiny. Okay, you can only see this bacteria under a microscope. So the bacteria in Yakult and Vitagen is actually useful bacteria. It's actually good for our stomach. That's why we drink it. Okay, so there are examples of useful bacteria. Okay, so just to recap, the four groups of living things that we learned: plants, animals, fungi, and bacteria. And very important, plants have a special power. Only plants can make their own food. Okay, fungi like mushrooms are not plants, so they cannot make their own food. Okay, so this is me tuning out for now. Bye, Tri.